Hey, what's up, guys? We're at a 3-1 lane here, and this is probably going to be my first ever rant video. I try not to do that too much, try to keep it professional, keep it a little bit light, but, you know, being gun guys, being a detail guy especially, always run into people here in Iowa, and this myth about shotguns always seems to come out, and so that's what I want to talk about today. So, I'll preface it by saying that I'm not in any way, shape, or form anti-shotgun. I own 4 of them myself. 3 are for hunting, 1 is for tactical applications, and within their own right and within their own area of expertise, shotguns are extremely versatile and very effective tools, not only to hunt with, to defend your property with, but in tactical applications, breaching, actually shooting motherfuckers, stuff like that. So we need to know what makes shotguns good at what they do. And the 2 main things that people always bring up when we talk about shotguns is going to be 1, the stopping power or the hitting power, and 2, the fact that if we're using buckshot rounds or some form of shot, that we're going to get multiple pellets, so we get a bigger pattern, and so that's going to help us get our shots on target even when we might not have to be quite as accurate. So number 1, shotguns with stopping power. Very true. Shotguns hit hard up close, extremely hard. Now that comes from 1 of 2 reasons. 1, if we're using a solid projectile slug, usually we're talking a 1-ounce soft lead slug. It's big, it's fat, and it moves slow. When it hits the target, the temporary wound cavity hangs around for a long time, and it's very big, does a lot of damage on target. Absolutely true. And number 2 is when we talk about buckshot. So buckshot 1, basically we have the same weight of projectiles. So if we're very close to the muzzle, essentially it's going to act like a slug and hit very hard. And as we get away from the muzzle a little bit, that pattern starts to open up. Now we get multiple projectiles on target. So we get to 1, cause multiple wounds. So obviously the more times that you poke a plastic bottle, the quicker all the water is going to run out. But also the shock on the nervous system, the physiological shock of being struck by multiple pellets, multiple projectiles at the same time, is higher than being struck by 1 pellet. Absolutely true. Very true up close. Now, when we start talking about utilizing that pattern opening up to help us with our accuracy at a little bit longer ranges, and for our very quick shots, that's very true. So as we get farther away from the muzzle, that pattern is going to open up. Typically with buckshot, we're going to say 1 inch per yard away from the muzzle. So the farther away from the muzzle, the bigger the pattern. All right, now that's going to go out to about, I've seen shotgun pellets out to 55, 60 yards with buckshot that will penetrate deep enough into tissue to cause serious injuries. But the farther away from the muzzle that we're going to get, the lower the velocity, so they're going to hit a lot less hard. So while we said those 2 things, what we need to know is that both of those things are on opposite ends of the spectrum. The closer I am to the muzzle, the more I get to utilize that really hard hitting power of the shotgun, whether we're talking with buckshot or slug. Closer to the muzzle, the tighter the pattern on that buckshot, the more it's going to hit like a train, and it absolutely does. The farther away from the muzzle that I get, the more the pattern is going to open up, and now I can take advantage of having to get multiple pellets out of there and helping me get my shots on target a little bit easier. But they're on the opposite ends of the spectrum. So the farther away from the muzzle that I get, now I'm getting less power from having all those pellets hit the target. It's going to be harder to get multiple pellets on target the farther away from the muzzle I get, even though it's going to be a little bit easier to hit some targets farther out. And now, well, it's easier to hit targets farther out with that pattern opening up. Now we're talking about doing a lot less damage the farther away from the muzzle that we get. So there's always going to be, somewhere in there is the perfect shotgun range. So I would say you split that in half, you get out to about 20 to 30 yards. You're still going to have a fairly tight pattern. You're going to get a lot of pellets on target, and you're going to get a lot of help out of that, but you'll still get some power out of there. So like I said, it's all in the application and the use of the shotgun. But those are the 2 biggest things that get thrown out with the shotgun. So now, living in rural Iowa, growing up with shotguns, everybody around here has shotguns, and most people, they swear by shotguns as being the best home defense weapon. I personally disagree for almost everybody, just because I think that only about 1% of people who swear by shotguns have ever actually tried to use a shotgun in close quarters. When we're talking combat or training or just in clearing their house. So when we're talking about using a shotgun in tight spaces, you need to get into your house, into your hallway, and try to actually work that shotgun around your hallways and your tight spaces. So as we can see, here's my carbine length M4, so 16-inch barrel, standard length for carbine length. Here's my Mossberg 590 Persuader. So it's 18-inch barrel, and then I've got this collapsing stock on there, improved cylinder choke. So this is very typical as far as shotguns go, and it's a good 5 or 6 inches longer just looking at it than my carbine is. So when it comes to using that in tight spaces, that's going to be very difficult. Most of the units that specialize strictly in CQB are moving away from the 16-inch barrel carbines and even going into things like 10-inch and 14.5-inch SBRs, the Mark 18s and things like that. So we're going to give you guys a quick demonstration, show you what it's going to look like using some of that buckshot up here in tight spaces. But most importantly, if you use a shotgun, absolutely no problem with that. But make sure But you take that thing out in your house, in your apartment, onto your property, and actually try clearing the tight spaces, getting into small spaces, small hallways with that shotgun, and see what it's really like to use. It's a little bit less user-friendly than you think that it's going to be. So check this out, see what you guys think. Alright guys, so just shot that from 10 yards, which is probably the farthest distance that any of us, or 95% of us, would ever have to use a shotgun or any weapon in a home defense scenario. And so I was using my Mossberg 590 Persuader. It's got an 18-inch barrel, improved cylinder choke, which is one of the most, if not the absolute most common tactical arrangement as far as shotguns go. I was shooting 3-inch Magnum double-aught buck round, so 15 pellets in there total. Got all 15 hit on here. Most of the time, people are going to use 2 3/4-inch shells, so you're going to have less pellets. 9 or 12 seems to be pretty common. And so as you can see, pretty good grouping here. Got a textbook here. Needed something for a little bit of scale. So we're just right about the edge of that textbook. So we're about 8.5 inches there, which sticks about what we said. So shotguns typically have about 1 inch of spread on the buckshot pattern per yard away from the muzzle. So as you can see, nice tight pattern. Up close, that would do a lot of damage, but we're also talking about not getting a humongous amount of help out of that. So that's going to help if we get that on target. That's definitely going to do a lot of damage, but it's not that huge, wide swath of destruction, death ray, lightsaber thing that we're typically going to see in the movies. So this is what we're looking for. This is what you can expect out of your shotgun, using buckshot rounds, using improved cylinder choke, up close and personal.